What's up, everyone? Welcome to my corner of the internet. I'm your host, Ryan Cramer, and this is Crossover Commerce, presented by Ping Pong Payments, the leading global payments provider helping sellers keep more of their hard-earned money. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Crossover Commerce. I'm your host, Ryan Cramer, and this is my corner of the internet where I bring the best and brightest in the Amazon and e-commerce space. If you're new to the podcast, welcome and thanks for tuning in for the first time. If you're not familiar with the format, this is a live interactive podcast where if you're tuning in from LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, thanks for tuning into my corner of the internet. Because it's interactive, you can ask myself or a guest all sorts of questions you might have about our topics that we have on an episode to episode basis. But this podcast will cover anything from sourcing to logistics, advertising, marketing, copywriting, anything from direct to consumership, Amazon, different marketplaces, growing globally. That is what this podcast is all about, helping you, the brand owner or the consumer, or if you're in the business, just starting out, building your brand. Welcome. And we're going to have some great information and tips and information for you to apply to your business today. That's what this is all about. So thanks for tuning in live, or if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast destination, thanks for tuning and listening in as well. So that being said, every podcast episode here on Crossover Commerce has been and is presented by Ping Pong Payments. Ping Pong Payments is helping people save more and keep more of their hard-earned money by optimizing their time, money, and effort with international payments, whether that's sending foreign currency to your VA, your supplier, your manufacturer, or if you're receiving funds from a different marketplace than you operate in. Make sure that Ping Pong Payments is saving you. Don't pay extra foreign exchange fees or currency exchange fees extra than you might have to. Put that money back to your bottom line or put it to your advertising. Help your business grow instead of leaving it on the table. You can go to usa.pingpongx.com/podcast for more information, as well as our past episodes. Again, this is episode 227 to sign up, and you can watch all of our past episodes that are live on the audio format, all of our transcripts, all of our key takeaways, you name it, it's going to be available there. But because this is episode 227, for context, we have, and our guest asked me this as well, how many episodes do you do a week? Well, that really does depend. It can be anywhere from 1 to 6. I've had as many as 6 in 1 week. This week's a little bit different, leading up to an event that we're going to be live at next week. It's actually just a quick little blurb about it. Prosper Show, which is happening March 14th through 16th in Las Vegas at Mandalay Bay. We will be there live in person. I say I am included in that. I will be there in person as a part of the group that will be attending there. We'll be doing podcast live, as well as past guests and future people that will be discussing topics in the Amazon and e-commerce space. We hope to see you there. If not, you can obviously tune into our social media channels and listen to free for all the insights of speakers and guests that will be attending. That being said, I want to go ahead and get into our guest today. This is our guest that we're going to be having on Crossover Commerce this week. Really excited about. If you're listening to this, this is Monday, March 7th. It's been a crazy already beginning part of the month, but we're going into, or I should say beginning part of the year, going into your business. A lot of people are asking questions. What are the things that are different in 2021 and 2022 to look out for? And I think a lot of people have a lot of the same questions. You have sourcing logistics problems. You have a couple of barriers to overcome. And one of those barriers is typically financially in the terms of advertising. And advertising, it can be profitable, but it also can be strategic in terms of how to get your business out there, how to make it grow, and how to get in front of the right audience. That's why ads are so important, is utilizing data subsets. How do you get in front of that audience to make them your product or service relevant to the people that are searching for you? It all kind of works together. So utilizing those context, we have a very special guest today. We've named the episode of today the top 3 mistakes you should avoid making in PPC, and we're gonna go on those, but also into more as much as we can get from him, because believe it or not, it is fantastic to have our guest today. He was one of the first 500 employees at Google. His name is Frederick Vallaeys. He is a Silicon Valley entrepreneur. He was obviously working at Google for many years, but then obviously helped grow the AdWords platform, was one of the first evangelists there, and now he's the co-founder and CEO of Optmyzr, helping businesses and brands do great things in PPC. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and bring him on the podcast. Frederick, thank you for tuning in, and I should say joining us here on Crossover Commerce today.
Hey, Ryan, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate the time. So this is beginning early from you. Well, I said Silicon Valley. That was my obviously context clue of where you're joining us from. You're joining us from California, correct?
I am. I'm in Los Altos, California, which is about 10 minutes down the road from the spectacular new headquarters of Google. That really unusual tent-looking structure.
Okay.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, look up photos of the new Google headquarters. It's pretty amazing what they built, and they just opened it. So kind of a cool place.
I was going to say, well, there's lots of headquarters that were being built, pandemic hit, a lot of people had to work from home. Now people I feel like are shifting back into the office life. Are you 100% at home now, or what's that for you and the Optmyzr team?
Yeah, so for me, it's unusual because I've actually always worked from home since we founded Optmyzr. I'm the one in Silicon Valley, kind of like close to where the action is.
Sure.
We have two teams. One is in Santiago, Chile. We have an office there, and we have an office in Hyderabad, India. Both of those offices have been closed, and we've really left it up to the employees to make smart decisions that work for them. And so if they wanted to go into the office is available to them. And we're actually doing an offsite in both of these countries. So the first time in 2 years. And it's crazy because like half the team that has joined by this point, they've never met their coworkers. And they've done an amazing job just, running the company, running support, building great products. But it's really exciting. So they're going to be in Goa and Valparaiso, two beach towns on the West Coast. So we'll all be looking at the same sunset one day and feel like we're a tight team again.
But that's what I was joking. Our managing director is actually going to be at this event that I was talking about at the top of the episode. This will be the first time I've met employees from my company in 2 years that I've been here with Ping Pong. So it's a strange. I feel like it's a new chapter, like you said. You're an author, so I'll reference the author and the books that you've written before, but it's a new chapter in the wave of hiring, but also operations in the new digital age. What has that transition been like for you? It seems like it's pretty seamless for a man of your caliber in your company.
Well, I mean, you talk to so I'm in Silicon Valley, right? So I talk to a lot of people here, and what's happening is relatively crazy because if you know anything to do with machine learning or artificial intelligence, like you can command insane salaries. And people are literally saying, hey, I work at Facebook, but if Google wants to hire me for their machine learning projects, great. Like pay me more money. And then before they even show up to Google, they've pivoted that new salary offer to a third company where they get even more money. And we're seeing a little bit of that same insanity where people get an offer from us and they're happy. They seem like they want to come in. They seem they want to work for us. And then sometimes the day that they're supposed to show up, it's like, hey, no, thank you. Like I'm going to do something else. So it has been challenging. And I think that's one of the reasons why, having a strong brand is so important. And obviously Optmyzr, we're still building that brand, right? But if you have a Google or a Facebook, like then people put that as part of the compensation package. Hey, I work for this huge prestigious company. And so I think that's why it's important for me to be on shows like this one, get the name out there, get people to understand what we stand for, what we want to achieve, and hopefully build some of that goodwill that then leads to people also wanting to work for us.
Absolutely. You were talking about hiring talent, especially in the tech and digital world. A lot of my friends in the service industry are saying, hey, it's a hiring bubble. It's something where a lot of you can demand new salaries, you can demand talent. It's super hard to find, but you have all of these openings for growth. And no matter if it's Amazon related or e-commerce related, anything that e-commerce is in the back end of, basically if it says e-commerce or ad specialist in e-commerce or ad specialist in Amazon, it instantly raises your threshold of people like yourself or businesses that are looking to hire talent. So obviously you have to find non-traditional ways of getting the name out there like this in the podcast, which is really cool on your end. So what's that like going from I'm just curious as a person in the space and a geek, if you will. We geeked out on some stuff like superhero stuff, like the shield in the background. We both like superhero stuff. What about As you're as you're kind of growing in this space, what's it been like going from a mega corporation like a Google and being one of the first employees and being there for, you said 10 plus years, I think is what is
Yeah,
true?
exactly. So it was just shy of 10 years when I handed in my resignation at Google. But that's kind of an interesting story too, right? So I joined it when it was fewer than 500 people. So my employee number was 833. And at the time, about half of those badges were for temps and vendors. So as a full timer, I was about first 500, roughly divided by
And that
two.
might seem like a lot, but that's actually pretty early on in the stages of Google, correct?
Yeah, I mean, over 60,000,
Right.
even more full-time employees. And by this point, the badge numbers are in the hundreds of thousands.
You're gonna have to have letters or something like that in there now.
Exactly. No, one time I called in to sell a bit of my pre-IPO stock, and so the person on the phone is like, "Oh, give me your employee number," and I'm like 833, and then the person says, "Yes, go on." And I'm like, "No, that's it." And I'm always thinking about these people like Marissa Mayer, who was employee number 12 or something. I mean, how cool is that to be single digits or double digits? Um, but yeah, it was really early on, and so I was brought in to be the first person, or the first person for the Dutch speaking market, which was the Benelux. So I'm originally from Belgium, so I speak Dutch. That's my native language. And Google was translating AdWords at the time into its sixth language, and they needed someone local in Silicon Valley who spoke it, who could translate, who could help do the customer support. So I was really lucky to have that unusual skill and be very valuable to Google. And so I went in and got that job, and then a ton of fun from there on out.
What did you do before Google? Were you in the e-commerce or Amazon space, or what space were you in before then?
Well, I did a 2-year stint at Sapient. It was IT consulting, and before that, I was in college.
Okay.
So I did my undergrad at Stanford, and while I was at Stanford, I would go to these local blockbusters, and they were selling video cassettes. And for people watching this call who don't know what video cassettes or blockbuster are,
VHS. Yeah, exactly.
look it up on Wikipedia. But basically, yeah, I mean, so the way that the movie industry worked was they would release these video cassettes to Blockbuster, and they would sell them for about $100 a piece. And the whole idea was, well, they can afford it because they're going to rent it out a bunch of times. And then a couple months down the line, they could actually sell these for a much cheaper price. So all these used cassettes, they'd have hundreds of them for popular movies. They'd liquidate them, right? But some of these blockbusters weren't following the schedule, and they would liquidate them way before they were supposed to. And so I caught on to this, and I started picking up some of these cassettes that were valued at $100+ for
Right.
like $10, and I flip them on eBay. But to drive more traffic to my listings, I discovered PPC on goto.com. So I was buying these keywords and sending traffic to my eBay listings, and I wasn't making a fortune, but enough money for going out
Yeah.
of college.
I was gonna say, for a young kid, you're probably making more than your neighbor, your roommate, or anything at that time.
Exactly. And I got exposed to PPC, and it was always a bit limited. And then I joined Google a couple of years later. So after Sapient, so I was at Sapient. The .com bubble was bursting back then.
Mm.
So I was basically in the last class of people that was admitted to Sapient. After that, they started rescinding their offers. So I rode that for about a year and a half. The .com bubble kept imploding and imploding. So eventually I got laid off. And then I went to Google. And then at Google, it was interesting because I was doing this whole Dutch AdWords thing, but I was also in these meetings with some of the customer support team for the really large advertisers. And really large back then was like you were spending $1 million a month, which nowadays it's like peanuts.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're mid-tier at that point.
Exactly. You're lucky if you have a rep who picks up the phone for you. But yeah, so I started hearing, oh, it's like all these mega affiliates, and it's like this and that kind of business. And I'm like, I can probably do some of that myself. So I signed up for Commission Junction, and I became an affiliate for eBay and 21st Century Car Insurance and a bunch of others. And I start placing these ads, and all of a sudden I'm making more money on my sideline being an affiliate versus working at Google. And then I actually had a dedicated account rep at Google who was sitting 2 desks away from me because I was spending so much money with them. So that was kind of a fun story.
I was gonna say, for them calling a phone number or anything like that and yours rang, they're probably curious, like, who am I talking to? This seems awfully familiar with the person who sits two desks away from me, but it was you. That's interesting. So I come from affiliate marketing world, and a lot of the tips and tricks that a lot of people say is obviously helping boost, and again, depends on the brand or the company, of boosting sales through PPC and ad spend. That's how a lot of people find it or get driven traffic to blogs or websites or promo codes and things like that. So you were doing this back when you were selling, VHSs and cassette tapes, and like you said, moving on with that regards. Did that just open your mind even more of, hey, there's going to be this world of digital advertising, like a billboard or like an ad in a paper or something tangible that you're going to be able to see this whole world explode into what it is now? Did you have any sort of insight or thoughts or even perceptions of maybe this is where the world continues to grow into, or this was a, like you said, blip on the radar and maybe we'll see what
Yeah,
happens?
I mean, I think so. When I lost my job at Sapient, it was definitely a decision point, and I had to figure out, where do I go? And Google, it wasn't that big of a company at the time. It kind of was getting some buzz, but I did think it was going to be big, and so I went there, and so the whole advertising at the moment of relevance, that just clicked for me, and that makes so much sense, right? Because the whole internet was fundamentally broken before Google came in, because everything was subsidized by like punch the monkey ads or ads for credit cards that you didn't really need. And then all of a sudden Google comes in and they're like, hey, advertising is information. We can actually answer people's questions and have it be a commercial answer, and somebody pays us for that. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, the internet works again. Like everything's cleaned up. You actually, and some people then complain nowadays. They say, well, we go to Google Ads and we go to Google Search. I called it Google Ads, but you go to Google Search and it's basically all ads. But at some level, that's okay because these ads are actually relevant. They have a high quality score and they give you an answer to the question that you had. And that was really the shift. And that's what myself and a bunch of other people, I guess, were like, yeah, that's going to be huge. And it's very fascinating too right now because Facebook is really being crushed by all these privacy initiatives from Apple, by the third-party cookie being deprecated. And see, Facebook is about interruptive advertising, putting stuff into your feed, into your stream. It's like it's trying to get you to think about something you weren't thinking about. But Google doesn't have that problem. I mean, right? If I'm still going to need a new pair of sneakers, I have a lot of sneakers, as you can see right there. That's just
Yeah, I see some
new Captain America stuff, right? And then if I go search for it, well, that's when I want to see these ads, and that's not being impacted at all by these privacy initiatives.
Well, what a lot of people in our industry are talking about is for brands and trying to drive traffic awareness. It used to be, again, ads in Google or Facebook/Meta and Instagram. A lot of people drive traffic through there, whether it be influencers or paid ads. Apart from skyrocketing prices, a lot of it is targeted to basically the customer avatar information that you provided. Google is based on a different functionality, albeit the search functionality and history is built up your customer profile and avatar, right? But you still have this notion of what's going to be relevant in front of me. A search engine is asking questions or looking for information, and you're going to disseminate information from it. I say Google will disseminate information that's relevant to that question, that search, that those keywords, I should say, to the person. Like you said, it's not disruptive. It's relevant information. Is that why I'm assuming in your mind, Google will outlast or outpace Facebook time and time again in that regards? Or is it different comparing apples to oranges?
No, I mean, I think that's exactly it. It's Facebook is using these personas and avatars to kind of guess at what you might be interested in. And that works to a large degree. Like, so I'm on Instagram, and I'll see ads for like workout clothes. I buy a lot of workout clothes. Okay. So they clearly know what's going to get me. But that's still so fundamentally different from on Google, where Google knows exactly what I asked for right now. And then it can put the persona sort of on top of that. And so now if somebody says, go to Google, and you look for sneakers, while Google might know what kind of brands you prefer, they might know from your avatar, are you a man? Are you a woman? Like, what gender sneakers do you tend to buy? And so now that specific request from you gets enriched with all this additional data, which makes those results even better, right? So if I'm going to look for shoes, I'm going to buy large shoes that are going to be my size, the brands that I prefer. men's styles. And that's great because Google is not wasting any of this really valuable real estate on things that are not going to matter to me. And if they can show me a page that has 5 ads that are hyper relevant to me, well, guess what? I'm going to click on 5 ads, and that's 5 times more money than if they'd only showed me 1 good ad. And I think that's what's so important about Google. I also had a chance to join Facebook relatively early-ish. Facebook has never mattered as much to me. I think if Facebook went away tomorrow, people might call me crazy, but if Facebook went away tomorrow, like, my life would not change. If Google went away tomorrow, like, I would not know how to operate. I could not get to places. Maps would be gone. I would not know how to do emails. I would not find stuff. My productivity, Google Docs, Google Spreadsheets, like, I just literally would not be able to operate for a while until I figured out how to replace all of these things that they've made so instrumental to my life.
With that's a good point. And key functionality of Facebook has inserted themselves into not a, I would say, like you said, it's relevant in terms of buyer intent. That's why the ads are so important versus Facebook. Like you said, it's disruptive of, hey, I know you're not looking for this possibility right now, but this might be something that might be relevant to you in the future. A page or a like or a person, maybe a product ad. With Google, like you said, it's ingrained itself in so many different other aspects of our life of, like you said, Gmail, work, just Google Workplace itself. Is that why Facebook falls kind of on that spectrum of, maybe if I removed it today from my life, it doesn't have its tentacles in so many different aspects of my life? Yes, there's no more influencers. Yes, there's no more like social media sharing pictures and things like that. But is that really integral to the inner workings of a business or a professional or things like that? I would say the answer is probably no, correct? Well, besides WhatsApp, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. In WhatsApp and Asian markets, there's a lot more commerce that happens through it. And I think, and I don't want to speak here for the younger generation,
Sure.
Because I know, like, when I tell people that I actually use email, they're like, wait, really? Like, everyone's on Slack. Like, my whole team is on Slack, and I still can't figure out how to operate in a business sense on Slack.
Sure.
But all the younger people somehow are able to do it, no problem.
It's like texting. Everyone wants to text instead of call now, and I prefer to call and talk to people. That's why I'm a podcast host, Frederick. That's why I like to understand from people. I can get the perception through a phone call or through a conversation with somebody other than that's nice, or just emojis or things like that. That to me is not communication. That is lazy communication. That's completely different. So anyways, that's me.
And that makes sense. I'm kind of like you in that. So, but that's where I don't want to make a blanket statement and say that Facebook doesn't play an integral part, because with these influencers and the way that people communicate, it is a huge communication channel, and not Facebook by itself, right? But Instagram and WhatsApp and everything that's around it, and Messenger. So it's hugely important. But I think the world would just people would go to TikTok, right, and kind of get the same thing. Whereas when it comes to Google, which has its tentacles in so many places, it's a little bit harder to replace. Now, and that also then leads into the whole thing about third-party cookies and first-party data. And so anyone who's not building first-party data nowadays for their advertising, that's probably, let's call that mistake number 1, right? You need to care about your first-party data and collect people's email addresses and build a direct relationship with your customers and people who come to your website. Because over the past decade or so, and even longer than a decade, but third-party cookies have been really nefarious in a way, but they've also made it really easy for us to know things that people do, even when it's not my business data, but I can go to a third party and say, hey, tell me about this user who came to my site. Like, what else do they do? What should I, try to sell to these people? And it's been a very lazy approach, and that lazy approach is no longer going to fly, because consumers are now picking up on the fact that, anything I do, I'm being tracked. There's DuckDuckGo as a search engine, which is basically built on the premise that if I'm going to search for a pair of headphones, I don't want to see remarketing ads all the time about those headphones. Right. And actually, they misposition this whole thing. So they say Google is the evil company for showing you remarketing ads. Well, no, it's actually the company whose headphones, they're the ones dropping the cookie and then giving that cookie back to Google to market through it. It's not the fact that you did a search on Google. It's the fact that you clicked on the ad and came to the advertiser. That's where the whole thing happens. But so I think as consumers sort of wake up to how the internet works and how the internet is monetized. And by the way, like, why do you think we get free news on the internet? Why do you think we get free Google Docs?
I was to say free email, space, all that fun stuff. I mean, all the free tools that we as a society maybe take for granted has to be paid for somehow, obviously. So, I mean, with advertising, that's always how businesses inevitably operated. If you watch like the social network of how Facebook came to light, how did they have to have adoption early on? They fought initially with when should you implement advertising and everything of that sort. And we're going back to ads on Facebook, which we'll pivot away from. But you want the free mentality so that people need you in their life. Again, the tools come later of, hey, sell hardware, sell software, or have it for free, but have it paid for by somebody else. Again, ultimately, it's probably companies and advertising. You have to do it smartly and intelligently. Otherwise, it'll be disruptive to your user base and customer flow as well. So, but for Frederick, I may have so many questions, which I should. As a podcast host, you said the top mistakes you should avoid making PPC. I was number one being that you're not building out your customer list with the avatars and retargeting. Correct? Is that in light the number one that you would always tell people? Make sure you're creating lists. If you're a brand or D2C website, create lists and know who your customer is and have their information for you. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. And then use ad systems, whether they be Google's or Facebook's or Amazon's, to layer that information on top of something else. B2B is another great category where, if you're selling printers as a company, but you want to target businesses buying 1,000 printers instead of a consumer buying a single printer, that's really difficult to do in search, because regardless, these two personas are going to come to Google and type in the same thing: printers, buy printers. How do you know which is which, right? For a long time now, we've relied on third-party data and Google being able to tell us, is this a business? Or Facebook telling us, is this like someone with a LinkedIn profile from a big company? And actually, it's Microsoft that has the LinkedIn relationship, right? But we have to assume that those third-party sources of data are going to go away, and we need to build our own lists of knowing who is that customer, who is that person, who's the company behind that person. So start thinking about that a little bit. Start building those lists, because soon they will not be available to you anymore through a third party.
Right. Amazon's already making that biggest shift of no longer you have customer addresses or names or anything like that. You can't create that lookalike audience. You have to kind of guess and just assume that your audience is going to come back. It's really hard to create that targeting aspect on that. What would be the second thing that you suggest brand owners or entrepreneurs that they, in order to optimize, and what they should avoid? What's that second thing?
Yeah, so when it comes to PPC and Google Ads specifically, there's a lot of automation being built, and that's really different from Facebook. It's different from Facebook. It's dissimilar from Amazon. And kind of the reason is that Google grew up in an age when we had to select our keywords. We had to write an ad. We had to choose a bid for every single keyword. All of this was highly manual. But now machine learning has come a long way. Google has a lot more data. So they're starting to automate a lot of these things for us. And then the biggest mistake I see people make is they think, oh, automation means set it and forget it, right? So they go in and they say, I have a target return on ad spend, which is the same as a target ACoS on Amazon. It's actually, the numbers are inverted, but it's the same concept. Right, but you go in and say, I have a 500% target return on ad spend, and then you walk away from that campaign, and then you're pissed off when things don't go well. I wrote a whole book on that topic. It's called Unlevel the Playing Field. I have it right here. It's on Amazon. But basically, the whole point of this is, yes, there's automation that will help you, but you still have to manage that automation. Right, so that's kind of mistake number two that I see people make.
Gotcha. And I was gonna say I was trying to do the link, but Amazon's link came up a little funky in the URL. But hey, level the playing field. I typed it in our show notes, and we'll have it linked on our listen notes as well for people. If you're watching this, go ahead and check that out. It's already in my cart on Amazon. So is that something that just came out, Frederick? Because you said this is your second book. Is this something that you've always wanted to do, is be an author in that regards?
Yeah, so that's my second book, came out January 26th, so relatively recent. Did I want to be an author? Listen,
I guess what made you become an author, I should say.
Yeah, better question. No, very, very good questions, by the way. You're a great podcaster. So.
I appreciate that. No, we have it on audio now, so we can always use it for our future promos.
Yeah, do you want me to say it again with no like?
Very good.
We'll do that at the end. No, so when in Google I became the evangelist. I really took on a teaching role, going to conferences and explaining stuff to people. And then I really enjoyed blogging for Search Engine Land. And I did this 3-part series. It was all the way back in 2017, I think, where I just sort of thought about what does the future of professional digital marketers look like in an age where more and more of their work is being taken over by the machines, by the automations from Google. And the fundamental question was simply like, should you get out of the space now, or will you have a job to do? And so we equated it to 3 roles: the PPC doctor, the PPC pilot, and the PPC teacher. And these are roles that we're all familiar with, right? So a doctor evaluates and prescribes something to make you better. The pilot sits in the plane, makes sure that all the systems are working and talking to each other, and the plane goes in the right direction. And the teacher teaches. And it's called machine learning. Machine learning is really what Google runs on these days. But learning implies that someone has to teach it, right? So you as the human still have a role to play within that. So I wrote these 3 pieces. They became the most read. All 3 of them were in the top 10 for that year. I was like, hey, maybe this is a topic for a book. Like, let me expand on this a bit. And that became book number 1. And then I was really nervous about reviews. And I was like, once you start writing a book or you give a speech a lot, it's like, are people going to be bored because you yourself have heard it so many times in your head, right? And it's like, is this old stuff? But people really liked it. I was like, hey, let me do a second one and actually go even a little bit deeper on the first book. And that's what that second book was about. So I think I'm going to do a third one too.
There you go. Well, I'm curious from your perspective. This is me talking. How does one become an evangelist at a company like Google? And again, you said this was early on. Is this like you're sitting in a boardroom or in an office and people are like, all right, we need somebody who's going to go to the conference and talk about our new solution, Google Ads. Everyone looks around and someone raises their hand and that person's you. How does that work out? Because that's an incredible story to become a person who has to speak on behalf of a major company. Again, major as us look back on hindsight, that you were the first person that said, I'm going to lead the way. Not the founders, not anything like that. Is it just because you were so ingrained and had the inner workings of everything? What's that process like to become an evangelist of something so important?
It was certainly the inner workings. So my dual role of being an advertiser and really knowing how the system worked, and then also working on the team that was supporting this, Google AdWords. So I was getting all the education from the engineers, the product managers about like, hey, here's what we're launching. And then I would see how advertisers were using it, what kind of complaints they had. And I would go and fix some of these issues myself. And it's sort of bridging like what's the theory and the reality of these two systems. Okay, and so then the executives from Google, so mostly Sheryl Sandberg, my boss at the time, so she was being asked to go and speak at events, and her management team was being asked to go and speak at events. And they'd be like, great, we can take a slide deck that marketing has put together or that they would have put together, and they can present it. But what they were nervous about was the questions, right? So what is the audience going to ask? And now it gets into the weeds, and now it gets into the tactics. And that's where they didn't really have the answers. And they knew that I did. So they asked me at one point, hey, can you just go and give this speech? Because we know you can do the Q&A. And I was like, I'm not an extrovert. I actually don't talk a lot in normal life. I was being asked to do all of these things, but I got a kick out of it. And I was like, I want to do more of this. And so it wasn't even all of us sitting in the room. It was me having the experience being asked by one person. And so I did a few of these, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna make a business card, and I'm gonna say AdWords Evangelist. So I was literally the first and only AdWords Evangelist for 5+ years.
Oh my gosh.
The only other evangelist we had at the company was Avinash Kaushik, the Google Analytics, the Urchin evangelist. And by the way, he wasn't working for Google at the time, so I was the people who bought Urchin. So Urchin then became Google Analytics, but we flew down to San Diego, went and met the team, acquired them, and then I was in charge of integrating the operations teams. So and then Avinash, who'd been talking a lot about analytics as a space, then he came to Google. But then we had two evangelists, and so it was a completely made up role. And then it was funny because as a smaller company, like the marketing team would come to me and say, "Hey, we've got this event. We need someone to go and speak about AdWords. Can you do it?" And like, sweet, I get to travel for free.
Right? Not a bad, yeah, nothing bad there. Well, that's a funny similar story to how this podcast come to be. Of, hey, we need somebody. We're trying to figure out. It was our China team that was asking, do we know anyone who can help our sellers to understand, not get in trouble with copyright infringement with images on Google or on Amazon? I go, yeah, I got somebody. Like I have a good group of people that I'm aware of. Let me go and ask them and see like if we can record a nice little soundbite or video. And my first talk was terrible. I was late. I looked sweaty. I didn't have any questions prepared. It was just a conversational format. But I'm sure like you, what's the best thing that you probably learned as a person? Maybe this is for the entrepreneurs out there who want to speak at events or conferences or have a perspective that's different than everyone else's, and they're asked to speak or present at those events or shows or to a business or organization. Do you have any tips or advice for people that might be doing that for the first time, or they're afraid that they have imposter syndrome or anything of that sort? What would you suggest to or say to them?
Yeah, I actually gave a whole presentation on this topic for the people who do the Hero conference. So that's Hennepin out of Indianapolis. I'm sure you know him.
I live in Indianapolis, so there you go. There you go. So right. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, imposter syndrome. First of all, we're all figuring this out. Like when I got on this call this morning and it's live, it's like, I hope to God Google announced something crazy this morning that I haven't read yet that Ryan knows about, because he's just okay. But Ryan's a nice guy, so he's not throwing me under the bus. No, but imposter syndrome, I think fundamentally, if you've done the work, if you've done the PPC, if you've done the marketing, if you've sold stuff successfully on Amazon, yes, you may not have done it the absolute best, perfect, right way, but clearly you've made it work somehow, and there's something to that that's worth sharing with other people, right? Even if that's going to be a different perspective from others. So that's the first thing. Imposter syndrome, don't worry about it too much. And that was the same thing with me and writing my book, right? But we just got to get it out there and then get the feedback. But make sure you've actually done the work. And then second level, make your own presentations, like write your own stuff. It's so easy nowadays to get lazy and get someone else to do the writing for you. And actually, I did have a ghostwriter on my book, so I'll be completely transparent on that one, right? But the blog posts that were the foundation for this book, like that's 100% my work, my thinking, my putting it on paper and iterating on it, right? And that's so critical to be able to then defend what it is you wrote, to be able to answer the questions, and to be able to give a good presentation, because if it's your story and you've put it in slides, like that story will just flow. 2 months ago, I went to Brussels. I did a keynote there, and the projector freezes, like literally just does not work anymore. Nobody knows how to fix it. And I'm like, fine, I'll talk for 30 minutes because I know the story. I know what I came here to share with you, and it's fine, right? And maybe people were a little confused because some of the slides were a bit technical, right? And so just me explaining a technical concept gets a little hairy. But like, I didn't break a sweat. It's just like, it's my story. I'm here to tell it. Here we go.
Excellent. Well, I mean, I think those are all great pieces of advice. And especially when you're trying to educate and tell people, it's impossible to correlate what's in your head versus someone else's word, because you have a different perspective and you've managed and done things differently, which is really hard to do. I know I personally feel a lot better when I present my own work. I put a lot more time and effort into it because I know it's me at the end of the day putting it on, instead of somebody from my company or another person who's like, hey, you can put words and sentences together. Why don't you just read this and present it and it will be fine. I don't like that mentality because, again, it's from a different perspective. It flows differently than you as an individual, and maybe as a company too, of you don't want to replicate, or I'm trying to correlate this back to our topic per se, is you can't just copy and paste your own work and your own ideas and strategies just because someone else said it works, right? You have to tweak it and fine tune it to what you say
exactly.
is out there. So, and we were talking about this pre-show of, I have this conversation pop up and ask this question: can you implement these strategies across all platforms? And the answer would be what? Like, I would say strategies of PPC. That would be no, correct?
No. I mean, and so it's interesting because as PPC, as digital marketers, I think a lot of us have become Excel gurus and data analysts in some way. And so those strategies of, okay, how do you identify money wasting keywords? Yeah, that's by and large the same as what you do on Amazon and what you would do on Google. But if you think about you as a marketer, well, who's the persona that is on Amazon? Like, what's their intent on Amazon, and how's that different from their intent when they're on Google versus Facebook? Okay, now we have to think about different strategies, different answers. And so in the tools that we build at Optmyzr, we were very adamant that we didn't want to build a tool where you say, okay, I have one keyword, just put it in all the different PPC engines. No, we want you to make like rational decisions about, well, this audience is a little bit different here, so these are the keywords they need, these are the keywords they need on Amazon, these are the ones they need on Microsoft, etc. And ultimately, that's probably going to build you more success than just taking a cookie cutter approach.
That makes sense. And obviously, like you said, the intent is different from an Amazon perspective to Google perspective. There's so many different, I jokingly say, and it makes a lot of sense, when you're searching for something on Google, for example, you're saying best like coffee maker or best work from home setup, something like that, where on Amazon, you already know it's a buyer intent ecosystem. So you're going to say work from home setup or coffee maker, or put the brand in front of it. So more of the intent is different, but the search functionality, still search bar, still can probably pull up the same similar, results, if you will, if you're doing one-to-one. But the persona of the marketplace of what you're searching on, or the engine or that search bar, is so different and vast of which you want to receive as the results. Does that make sense? So that's why I think it's your PPC. You're probably on Amazon just going to try to rank for coffee maker. On Google, and this is very simplistic, on Google, you're going to say, hey, top coffee makers, and you're going to try to target those keywords, so on and so forth. So is there another tip that we haven't covered that you would say avoid this at all cost, Frederick? People that you see time and time again that they're going into the same hole or those same issues, and you're like, listen, our strategy is this instead.
Yeah, I mean, I'll share another huge money waster that we see many, many times is, whether it's on Google or somewhere else, there is a display network and there are mobile apps. And so now we're not talking necessarily about the search experience, but we're talking about kind of putting your brand, your product in front of people who are doing something else but might have an interest in it. There's a tremendous amount of money being wasted on some placements that just have high volume but no intent. And so that's really easy to measure because you can see how much money you've spent on that placement, and you can see how many conversions came in from that placement. And so we routinely look at accounts where it's like $8,000, $20,000 per month on a single placement that has led to zero sales. That money could be so much better allocated somewhere else. Or if that's like, okay, a place where you spend $20,000 on ads, that's probably a high volume place, right? But wouldn't you be better off buying a branding ad and having an actual strategy, as opposed to that just randomly showing up as one of the placements that your ads go on? Right. And so that's probably one of the bigger mistakes that I think almost anyone can run a placement report and find some amazing exclusions to do and save a lot of money.
Absolutely. I see ads popping up all the time within blogs. And I mean, how the Google Display Network works is anywhere there's blank space, I know they're trying to optimize for that, but I can't imagine that some of those click-throughs or some of those performance metrics that we were talking about earlier can be very good. Obviously, you're probably going for a visual context and just a reminder context instead of a click-through performance and a conversion performance. But I can't imagine some of those some of those campaigns being very good, like you were mentioning. So tell me about this Optmyzr. You moved from Google to Optmyzr. We didn't even make that jump. What was the why behind that? Because I'm curious for you. Was it just a different, similar context, but this is an agency more like than obviously the product itself of what you were probably working with and working on. What was that biggest jump from a corporation like that to now this is your own business that you want to build from the ground up?
Yeah, exactly. So Optmyzr, so we're a PPC management software. We manage over $6 billion a year in ad spend.
That's billion with a B or a million?
With a B.
Holy cow. All right. Six
So
billion. All right.
We see a lot of ad spend. We manage a lot of ad spend, but we don't manage it, right? We're not an agency.
Sure.
We help agencies, we help big advertising teams manage these billions of dollars more effectively and avoid some of the mistakes that I talked about, and then do some of the things they know they should be doing more efficiently in less time. So it leaves more time to be strategic as opposed to pushing buttons. So we have great automation capabilities that you can layer on top of the ad engines, whether it's Amazon, Google, Microsoft. But how did that jump happen? Also, Google joined when it was less than 500. Then actually at the time that I left, it was already 60,000. So numbers must be much higher now. But yeah, it just got too big and too corporate, one too many restructures. And Nikesh Arora, he was basically like, listen, we don't want to have any evangelists. We need you to like go and sell. And he wasn't making the connection that people being positive brand representatives were actually building goodwill that made the job of the sales teams and the support teams easier, and that had value. But that value is hard to quantify. And he wanted to get rid of that. And I was like, listen, I've been here long enough. I've built up enough of a nest egg that I can just take a little break and go and do something else. And I didn't know what it was, but I knew I didn't want to do it for Google anymore at that time. So I left, and then I did do an agency for about a year. And in running that agency, I was like, holy shit, like I thought I did a really good job building tools when I was inside of Google to make people's lives easier. But there's so many things that are still so much more difficult than they really should be. And especially things that professional marketers do, right? So for the new advertiser, it's fine. Use Google systems. But if you have this methodology that's like a best practice that's going to set you apart from the competition, like that stuff tends to be really hard to do. And we started building that. I started building it as scripts. And then people started using these. And I was like, how do I make money from this? And so we built a software company.
There you go. Well, so what's kind of the next steps for you? Because Optmyzr's been around for a few years now. Is that correct?
Yeah, 9 years now.
9 years now. So now you're almost at the same length that you were at Google. What's like your end vision now that you're saying, hey, kind of see what this looks like? You're managing billions of dollars worth of ad spend. Well, what's kind of the goal for you? Maybe it's changed over the past couple of years, but what's that end road for you that you think of? Hey, I feel like we've achieved what I wanted to achieve, or us as a team have wanted to achieve. What is that for you?
I think, unfortunately, in the PPC space, there's the end goal is never achievable.
Right.
Google and the engines just keep changing everything.
Prices keep going up, yeah, and things keep optimizing and changing.
Exactly, and that's the thing, right? Prices keep going up, so for you to still be cost effective, you have to do different things. And then Google introduces Performance Max campaigns, which is a new, like, fully automated campaign type. They changed up the ad format. So instead of you writing a fully qualified ad, now you put in components and they put it together based on machine learning. So like there's never a dull day. And me and my team were constantly figuring out, well, okay, given this new world, what is the way that you unlevel the playing field back in your favor? And what does that mean from a tool perspective and an efficiency perspective? And see, listen, we've never really taken money from the engines to do the work that we do. So we've also never taken investment. So it's me and my two co-founders who really set the mission for the company. And that mission is to make advertisers' lives easier and make sure that you make more money so that your boss is happy and you get to have your job, but you also get to see your children and family on the weekend because you don't have to push buttons 7 days a week. And that's kind of the goal, right? I can keep that going, but at the same time, grow the business and provide a great place for the employees to work, give them some fun challenges to do along the way, be able to take them on these trips like we're going to Goa and Valparaiso and right before the COVID lockdowns, we all went to the French Alps, and we had a big offsite there.
Wow.
Right, and this is kind of the fun stuff of having a fun company that does meaningful work. So we just want to continue doing that.
Yeah, the mission and the meaning, it sounds like it's very important for you to actually help out and bring forth the value instead of the dollar signs. That obviously that's important too, but it seems like what's leading the way is that mission statement, that ultimate value of what you can do as a person and as a thought leader, as a company. That's what's leading the way, which sounds pretty favorable for the company and everyone in your corner, I should say. So Frederick, I guess when people are listening to this and they're watching this on replay, what do you want people to, how do you want them to reach out to you? Do you want them to go to your website? What's that best way to do that? We've linked out to your book, which obviously I will be ordering here very soon, right after this call. But how do they get in touch with you, or how do they connect with Optmyzr?
Yeah, so Optmyzr is optmyzr.com. So left out a lot of vowels. But usually if you search it on Google, you'll find the right one. So check us out on there. I'd love for everyone to go and check out the free trial. So if you're doing PPC and you want to see how much money you can save, we even have a free plan. It's called Optmyzr Lite for advertisers doing less than 10K a month in ad spend. And then if you want to reach out to me, you can reach out through the support forums and tell them to get a hold of me, or find me directly at Silicon Vallaeys on Twitter. You can connect with me, DM me, do whatever, but that's usually where I hang out. And then hoping to get back to a lot more in-person conferences. Actually, you're going to be in Las Vegas next week. I'm going to be in Paris, the real Paris, not the Las Vegas Paris.
You're going to be in Paris, France, not Paris on the Strip. Okay. Exactly. Well, hey, that sounds like an enjoyable experience for me. I love Paris. So what will you be doing there?
So there's a conference, SMX. I was actually supposed to do a conference in London on the first day, Paris the second, and Munich the third. Munich has gone virtual. London has been postponed. So, but I still get to
Paris. It is. All right. Exactly. Well, this is my first event, and I jokingly tell this with people. It feels like the first event that I will personally have attended in years. The last one I think I was at, oh my gosh, it was in San Francisco. It was a Rakuten conference because I was working on the D2C side. Happened to work with Rakuten. You were talking about affiliate marketing and commission junction earlier. I know all about the platforms and how crazy that space is in the affiliate side. So got to learn from the great people over at Rakuten, which I'll have a webinar on later this week. So gets it full circle. It feels like full circle all the time with people. They're always come back in more content, but that's really exciting. Congratulations on that and safe travels. So we'll make sure that people, if they reach out to you, obviously through the website or follow you on social media, they do that as well. So, but hey, thank you so much. I always jokingly say people who make it through an episode with me are not friends of the podcast. They can hang with me for an hour or so. You've clearly done that. Super fascinating as a person, as an entrepreneur, but as a human too. So thank you so much for just spending some time with me in my corner of the internet today. Awesome. Thank you so much, Frederick.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everyone, for watching.
No problem. And thank you, everyone, for coming on Crossover Commerce today. I have to press the right buttons here on a Monday. I keep muting myself. Thank you for everyone who's tuning in live today on Crossover Commerce. Again, this is episode 227. That means 227 episodes have passed where I bring on the best and brightest in the Amazon and e-commerce space. Big thank you to Frederick and his team over at Optmyzr for letting him come on here, spend some time here to talk to you, the audience. Hopefully you got a lot of great takeaways from that. All the content that we talked about today will be in the show notes below, linked out into the appropriate profiles. Also, check out his book, Unlevel the Playing Field. Again, it went live. It says January 14th. So it looks like it literally a few weeks ago just came out. Something that you can just download, or you can buy the paper or hardcover versions, or if you're a Kindle person, you can do that as well. So go ahead and check that out. Unlevel the Playing Field, the biggest mind shift in PPC history. Book 2, Frederick promises book 3. So I will be following him on Amazon as well for that third book to come out as well. That being said, this is episode 227. Again, we'll catch you guys next time when we go live, and that'll be at Prosper Show here in less than a week on Crossover Commerce. We hope to see you guys there and tune in there next week. We hope to get you guys soon, and catch you next time. Take care.